This week, we get a little bit of a break, but it is simply just the calm before the storm. And this week is just leading up to the Mercury retrograde at the end of this week. So a lot of this week is about taking your time and getting ready for August. So let's go ahead and get started with it. Welcome back to the Astrology Report. My name is Cam Wyatt. I'm a professional astrologer. I've been doing this for over 8 years, and I've literally seen thousands of clients. And make sure you subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up to date with all of the astrological transits going on. If you haven't already, go ahead and check out my Mercury retrograde video that I just posted if you want to know exactly how this Mercury retrograde is going to be affecting you and your zodiac sign. This week, we're going to be talking about July 29th through August 4th of 2024. And the good news is throughout the majority of this week, it's relatively calm. It's just some lunar transits. But at the end of this week, we have all of the highlights, which is Venus going into Virgo, Mercury retrograde, the new moon in Leo. And so this week is an excellent time to prepare for all of this stuff. You know, sometimes in your life, you just kind of have a nice 5-minute window to kind of get ready for a big thing. That's what this week is about. So on Monday, all we're having is the moon making a conjunction to Uranus, and then the moon is going to ingress into Gemini and then make a square to Mercury. Now, it's the moon conjoining Uranus. You want to prepare for some sort of a disruption. What's fun about, and I'm saying fun with a little bit of sarcasm here, but what's fun about the moon conjoining Uranus and Taurus is the moon in Taurus wants to find some stability, some grounding. Again, it's like, you know, if you get car sickness or you just rode on a roller coaster, the moon in Taurus is like, I just need to sit down for a minute and kind of like hang out and, you know, ground myself. When the moon conjoins Uranus, you really don't get that. And there's a way to like work with it and there's a way to work against it. If you want to work against it, expect to have stability, expect to have everything just calm and stable. You're going to have some disruptions, and I think that's going to throw off your vibe a little bit. But with Uranus, it does rule things like innovation and creativity in terms of problem solving. So when the moon does make a conjunction to Uranus on Monday, there's going to be some instability, but don't be afraid to maybe get a little bit out of your head and think of a creative solution or a way around it. The moon conjoining Uranus is really good for just having sporadic thoughts and trying something new and different. Although, while the moon is in Taurus, it is going to bring about some upheaval that is, again, just disrupting in general. But then as the moon ingresses into Gemini, it's going to make a square to Mercury. A lot of this is really like gaining a lot more information that's probably going to change your mind on some things. Like I said last week, Mercury is now in Virgo. We have a lot of like information available to us. All of the papers are there. But as Mercury is slowing down a lot, we're realizing that, hey, the plans that we had might need a little bit of a change. They might need to be reorganized a little bit. And I think as the moon's in Gemini, the moon in Gemini is about communication and sharing ideas and information, but it's going to make a square to Mercury. So this idea of like all this information that we're getting is going to kind of disrupt our plans a little bit. And when I say disrupt, it's not going to be like the moon conjoining Uranus, but this kind of like, oh, I was going off of this information, but now that I'm receiving this information, I might need to change my plans a little bit here. So Monday's really not all that bad or crazy. It's just more so of prepping us for what Mercury retrograde is going to be like. And then we get to Tuesday, and that's when the moon is going to first make a conjunction to Mars, and then it will make a conjunction to Jupiter while they're all in Gemini. Tuesday has a little bit of a frustration to it because Mars is all about fights and conflicts, and it's in Gemini. Like, I have Mars in Gemini. I love debating and arguing. Mars in Gemini is like using words as like violence or like as a weapon. And I know that's kind of like a thing nowadays where people are like, oh, you know, words are violence. Not really, but it's just like debating and argument and argumentative. Anyway, the moon conjoining Mars is going to feel frustrating. Like you're trying to get your point across and no one's really listening, or you're being a little bit too aggressive with getting your point across. Or someone is trying to get their point across to you in a very aggressive manner and you might be resistant to it. There's this combativeness in the air on Tuesday. But that's only for a little while, and that's when the moon is conjoining Mars. Once the moon separates from Mars, and this is still kind of somewhat in the morning, sometime in the afternoon on Tuesday, the moon's going to conjoin Jupiter. This is one of those times where, have you ever had an argument with someone where you were like arguing and debating, and then after it was over, you were like, damn, maybe I was actually wrong and they were actually right about that, or vice versa. They were like, damn, they were like really wrong. What was their fucking problem? And then maybe they send you a text. They're like, you know what, you're right. I was maybe a little bit wrong about that. The moon conjoining Jupiter is just learning something out of it. Jupiter in Gemini is realizing, like, again, how our thoughts and our beliefs may not be functioning all that well right now. And we're really kind of being inquisitive about what our beliefs are and do they work and do they not work. That's a big theme for August. And if you're on my Patreon, I posted the August monthly game plan and talked a lot about it being about crisis management. This month in August, we're going to be having Jupiter make a square to Saturn. And it's kind of like a reality hitting moment of like, hey, where are things not working on the bigger scale? And where do I have to really go within to change those things? And I really look at the moon conjoining Jupiter as an opportunity to see the bigger picture, to gain more insight and information, especially if you think that you're right about something and you do some research and realize, oh, I didn't have all of the information there. And that doesn't mean that you have to be wrong. It just might be an opportunity to take a step back and be more open-minded about something. So Tuesday, try, if you're going to be combative, if you're going to be argumentative, again, there's a leniency towards that. Try not to have it too extreme or get your, panties too up in a bunch. Because as the moon conjoins Jupiter, we're going to see a bigger picture. It's going to be a little bit more lighthearted. And I think we're all going to be able to walk away saying, hey, maybe we all got some things wrong about it. And then on Wednesday, we're going to have the moon in Gemini first make a square to Saturn. Then it's going to make a sextile to Venus. And then it's going to square Neptune. And then it'll ingress into Cancer. So Wednesday's kind of funky because I think as the moon's in Gemini squaring Saturn, the moon squaring Saturn is always like a no or a stop or a slowdown. Last week, by the way, thank you so much for all the birthday wishes. I meant to actually open up with that. I really appreciate it. I can't believe I'm 28 right now, but I really appreciate all of the birthday wishes from you guys. I'm very excited for this year. Kind of. Mars is my time lord, and it's going to retrograde over my sun. So, hopefully nothing too bad happens to me. But anyway, last week, the moon was in Sagittarius making a square to Saturn. It was just like depletion, like tired energy. Like I'm tired of going. I was driving back from Aspen and I was just absolutely exhausted. And so the moon in Gemini making a square to Saturn Pisces is essentially the same thing. Now it's again more of a waning moon, but as the moon is in Gemini making a square to Saturn, this is kind of like just knowing when to stop, knowing when to not overshare, knowing when you're just kind of like talking endlessly without any sort of point B to get to. Now, as the moon does make a sextile to Venus, this is kind of a shrugging it off, more of a lighthearted kind of a vibe. I think as the moon's in Gemini squaring Saturn, there is this resistance to communication. You might be like, hey, I have this idea. And someone's like, no, you're dumb. That's a dumb idea. And you might kind of internalize that a little bit. But as the moon sextiles Venus, it's like you can just shrug it off. We can just have a little bit of fun and lightheartedness here. Like you shouldn't let that affect your ego too much. You shouldn't let that affect, like, again, like you're just, I don't like saying those triggering spiritual words like, oh, your soul or like empowerment. But like Venus is in Leo. You should radiate some confidence. You should be about like, hey, like if you're a performer, if you're on stage, so to say, like you can't let little tiny things get to you because something, for example, when you work with cameras, it takes twice the amount of energy to communicate on a camera because if I'm like, this is like my regular energy, like, okay, this is blah, 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 what we're going on. You see how like low energy I am? I have to almost like perform a little bit in order to get the video across. And this seems like my normal energy. That moon squaring Saturn is kind of like, hey, you're going to maybe get a little bit of that low energy, but the moon sextiling Venus is like, hey, shrug it off a little bit, have a little bit of fun, be witty about it. But then as the moon is in Gemini the moon in Gemini will make a square to Neptune. And a lot of this is just feeling lost and confused. And oftentimes, like, what I find really interesting about the political situation right now is both sides feel very confused about everything. The people who don't think that they're confused and have a lot of clarity, I think are genuinely lost. But there's so much information going out and there's so much confusion to where it's just kind of like, what is going on? And I think what's really interesting about both sides of the political aisle right now is that there is this kind of like, literally, what the fuck is, what is going on right now? Why is everything all over the place? And I look, and I'm using that as an analogy, but the moon in Gemini is like, here's all this information, here's all this data, and it's squaring Neptune. Like, there's something about this information and data that is obfuscating the reality, obfuscating the truth. And it might just be one of those days where all of the information is so overwhelming that it just is going to confuse you. So I think what's really nice about Wednesday, or at least the opportunity on Wednesday, is to know when to, like, again, stop scrolling, stop reading the news, stop thinking about stuff. Turn that little brain off, lobotomize yourself for like 5 minutes. And what is nice about the moon in Gemini squaring Neptune is immediately after, when we feel that like, okay, I'm a little bit too lost here, the moon then goes into Cancer. And this is where we just, hey, what do we need to focus on today? I think it's really easy in these kind of times to freak out about the future. I know that I'm guilty of that because I do astrology. My whole fucking job is looking at the future and what's going on. And there's times where I like, obsess about it or think about it too much. And there's other times where I'm like, that's not important right now. What is important is like, again, is my house clean? As you can tell, my bed's not even made. Are my dishes done? Do I need to do laundry? Like just prioritizing the necessities. And it really takes my mind off of everything, and to where when I could just focus on what's in front of me and what's important, it really alleviates a lot of that anxiety. And so I think Wednesday has that opportunity. And I think before the moon goes into Cancer, there is that kind of frustration. The moon's in Gemini. There's all of these transits going on. Later on Wednesday, as the moon goes into Cancer, it's just a time to say, you know what? I'm going to turn all that off and just prioritize and focus on what I have to do. Then we get to Thursday, and on Thursday, all we have going on is the moon making a sextile to Mercury. And all this is just being open to curiosity and problem solving. The moon's in Cancer. We're thinking about what is in front of us and what is of a necessity to take care of. And Mercury, it is slowing down. It is about to go retrograde. Again, that's the major, like all of the highlights this week are on Friday and Sunday. So again, make sure you watch this whole video for that, because that's all what we're prepping for here. The moon is waning at this time. When the moon is waning, the energy is a little bit lower and we're starting to get more focused and concentrated on one area of our charts, right? That's what this whole week is we end the week with the new moon in Leo, with Mercury going retrograde, and it's like on Sundays when everything kind of changes and we start building up for something again. But as the moon is in Cancer making a sextile to Mercury, this is just kind of like, for example, when you are prioritizing and focusing on the necessities, this is an opportunity to, again, revisit that. Is there a better way that you can go about it? Is there a more efficient way that you can go about it? And this just seems like a light-hearted transit in order to, again, when you're kind of just focused on what's in front of you and what is important to you, what you have to do, and not necessarily the bigger things that might be outside of your control, there's an opportunity to organize things differently or look at things differently and just have a sense of clarity that maybe you didn't have before. And then we get to Friday. And on Friday, we do actually have a highlight, but we'll have the moon in Cancer making a trine to Saturn and Pisces. And the highlight that we have is Venus making a square to Uranus. Now, here's the thing with this. What I like about the moon in Cancer trining Saturn is just being able to prioritize and just do what's necessary. On Thursday, when we have the moon in Cancer sextiling Mercury and Virgo, it's okay, how can I better organize my laundry? Maybe it's one of those days where you actually do your whites, your colors, and your darks. You know what I mean? Rather than just throwing them all together. But on Friday, when the moon is trining Saturn, it's we're just doing what we have to do. If Saturn's about responsibility and duty, obligation, the moon in Cancer is okay, this is something I have to take care of. I can't really ignore it. Again, maybe it's a day that you get your oil changed or whatever that is. But we do have Venus making a square to Uranus. I wrote down on my notes here that this is a wardrobe malfunction. Now, what's interesting is if we go back to last summer of 2023, between July and August, we had Venus going retrograde in Leo, and she made 3 squares to Uranus, where it was a bunch of trial and error. It was a bunch of looking at things. What do we want? What do we like? And trying new things and not liking it. But as Venus in Leo does make a square to Uranus, I look at this as more so as an analogy of wardrobe malfunction more than I do as trying to experiment with something. The reason why is if I see Venus making a trine to Uranus or Venus conjoining Uranus, that's more of experimenting with something, going a little bold and getting out of your comfort zone and it being able to work. Venus in Leo squaring Uranus just almost reminds me of a bad spray tan. If you've never got a spray tan before and you're I want this color and you look, like you're a bodybuilder. That's the way I really look at it. Venus in Leo is trying to perform. Venus in Leo is trying to have more fun and, again, heightened our sense of confidence. And as it squares Uranus, something might happen that's uncontrollable that might diminish your confidence a little bit. That might, again, if your heart is out there and your soul is out there, again, think as a performer and something goes wrong with the stage or your music cuts out, it might be easy to take that personally. But again, you really want to shrug it off with this kind of stuff. Venus squaring Uranus is, again, you might try that new outfit and you really don't got that shit on and just laugh it off. Don't worry about, taking it personally, or just throw that thing away and never do that again and just learn from the lesson. But Venus squaring Uranus, if Venus is love and fun and connection and pleasure, she's squaring Uranus, where again, you might go out of your way and try, for example, I don't like seafood really at all. I like sushi, but I've tried oysters before. I really didn't care for it. I don't know what the whole deal with it is. But let's say, using this analogy, I go to try oysters, aphrodisiac, Venus and Leo. But then I find out I'm allergic to oysters and my whole face puffs up and I have to go to the hospital for EpiPen or something. That's kind of the vibe with Venus squaring Uranus. Is you might want to get out of your comfort zone and try something new, but it's probably not going to go the way that you expect it, which is fine. It's not don't try anything new. Just things might come up that offer that opportunity and just know it may not go perfect. Don't be afraid to try something new and then you just may not like it. It's okay. And then we get to Saturday and the moon is going to make a trine to Neptune. So the moon's still in Cancer, making a trine to Neptune in Pisces. And then the moon will ingress into Leo. It's going to go opposite Pluto and sextile Mars. So there's kind of a black and white vibe going on Saturday. As the moon's in Cancer making a trine to Neptune, I always just think about nostalgia and comfort and a longing for something. 4 years ago in 2020, I bought an iPod Classic. There's a guy I found on Etsy that puts SSDs in there, and I have a terabyte iPod Classic. And I got into vaporwave a little bit. And if you're not familiar with vaporwave, it's a really cool style of music. It's chopping and screwing old 80s and 90s songs that were really underground that no one really knew. And what it's really about is Gen Z's really kind of started vaporwave. And the idea is creating music and sound and art that reflects a past that we romanticize that we didn't really get. So you have all this 80s and 90s music and they they make it into a way that's better than what it actually was. It's like our fantasy version of it. And it's really awesome to just explore if you're like into nostalgia, which everyone's into nostalgia nowadays. It's a big selling point. But the moon in Cancer trining Neptune is like looking for that nostalgia, feeling that nostalgia. And it's like a longing for something. You're looking for that comfort. And so there is an opportunity to look for comfort through media. Again, maybe watch an old Disney movie or something like that before they got shitty. That's kind of the vibe. But then the moon goes into Leo, and it's a complete vibe shift because now we're getting into the new moon in Leo. So now we're getting into that dark moon phase. And the way that I've been looking at this is the green room. This is the green room before you go on stage. This is, think about, like, let's say you're a king or a president and something major is happening and you got to get yourself prepared and ready to be that leader, to say that thing, to make that address that you have to do. That's the vibe when we have the moon going into Leo, going opposite Pluto and making a sextile to Mars. The moon going into Leo is now our emotions are much more connected to our image, to our pride, to how the world sees us and getting ready to go on stage. The moon going opposite Pluto, though, there's some tension there with fear. So again, like, let's say you're a king and you're about to make an address to the people over a really controversial topic or a very important topic that there could be some sensitivity around. Like, you can't let that deflate you, or you can't let that anxiety take you over. You have to step more into, again, that individual sense of power. And you have to, again, it also does come down to optics in some sort of way. But as the moon goes into Leo, this is like, all right, the green room time. How are we feeling? You kind of have to, when you walk through that door, you have to take away all of that anxiety. You have to take away all that fear. You have to leave all of that behind, and you have to step up. That's the vibe. And as the moon makes a sextile to Mars in Gemini, it reminds me of, like, let's say you are about to go to a fight. You're an MMA fighter, and you might have those nerves and that jitterbug, in the green room before you walk out to the octagon. The moon in Leo is like they're playing your song. You start to walk out. There's some anxiety and fear. You might be the underdog. But the moon sextiling Mars and Gemini is like you got a team around you, high-fiving you, being like, you're the shit. You're going to kill this. You're going to do great. There's a little bit of an energy pump going on Saturday to kind of get you excited for what's coming. But then we get to Sunday, and this is when we have the new moon in Leo. And not only are we going to have the new moon in Leo as a highlight, we will have the moon then making a sextile to Jupiter right after that new moon. We're going to have Venus ingress into Virgo, and this is when we have Mercury going retrograde. There's a lot of vibe shift on Sunday, so make sure you subscribe to the channel to make sure you see next week's horoscope, because we'll be talking, of course, more about Mercury retrograde. Then Mercury stations retrograde really late Sunday evening. Of course, I'm going to talk about it right now. But new moon in Leo, what do you have to do in your life? And with all of these things that you have to do, who do you need to be? Who do you need to be in order to do those things? And it's not a fake it till you make it. It's you are that person. You have that confidence. You have that leadership capability. You just have to step up and do it. As the new moon in Leo happens, it's really about looking out. Again, this is the sun in its home sign. And the sun is about, again, our willpower, our vitality, our energy, our identity. How do we exuberate that? And can you now that we have the sun transiting through Leo, this is our one time in every 12 months to really harness that energy. And as this new moon in Leo happens, it's like, you have to be that guy. Like, you ever see the memes that are like, you're not that guy, pal. Well, doesn't matter. You have to be that person. And you may not have the opportunity to not be that person. You might be a parent in a really, tough situation, and your kids are dependent on you and you can't break for them. You have to step up into that role. And that's what this new moon in Leo is really about, is stepping into that role. As the moon then makes a sextile to Jupiter, when you just even take the slightest nudge in the correct direction, you will feel that sense of confidence. When you do one or two tiny things that you probably shouldn't do, it spirals and it goes down. Versus if you just change your direction by a degree and you just do those one or two little tiny things that are really insignificant, but they lead you in that better direction, that they build you up a lot more. That's what this is. The new moon in Leo is like, all right, lock it in. The moon sextiling Jupiter immediately after is those little tiny changes, that just locking in moment, getting quiet with yourself, realizing who you are and who you need to be and that you can be that person is going to set you up for a much better trajectory. And what is nice about the moon making a sextile to Jupiter is this is just seeing the opportunity, right? Like seizing the day of being like, okay, I can be this person. Moon sextiles Jupiter. It's like, sweet. I'm glad I stepped into that, because now I see the opportunity of why that was important and why I needed to be this person in order to get that opportunity. But the other two highlights that we have on Sunday is Venus ingressing into Virgo and Mercury going retrograde in Virgo. So again, this is, I don't want to just say a vibe shift, because it's really just kind of the last hurrah of Leo season, in my opinion. Because after this, it's really just the sun ingressing through Leo. But as Venus does go into Virgo, what's hard about this is Venus is about pleasure and fun and connection, and she's just fallen. Like, it's just going to be hard to enjoy things all the way. Now, this isn't like you're just going to be like upset, but Venus in Virgo is like, you have to be able to enjoy the uncomfortable. For example, for my birthday, I went to Aspen and I did a bunch of stuff up there, but I went to something called the Yampa Vapor Caves. Never heard of it before, but it's essentially a cave that you go into that's like, I don't know, 120 degrees and like 1,000% humidity. And it's this dark cave. And when I went down in there, I started having trouble breathing. I hate being hot. Like, I can't do too, like, I have like my AC at like 65 degrees all day long. I can't be that hot. And when I walked down there, like, I was having trouble breathing and my eyes started fogging up. Like, it was that humid down there. And it was, I'm not lying, guys, it was pretty fucking intense. And when I went down there, what you do is you hang out for 5 or 10 minutes and then you come back up. You could chill out in a solarium or, again, take a quick shower. So I did that. I was really uncomfortable, but I stopped. I went back upstairs. I hung out, cooled off for a second. Then I took a shower and went back down. And the second time, it was so much more pleasurable. Like, I wanted to stay down there. Like, I can't even begin to explain the feeling of like just sweating immediately and just getting all that. And it was a little gross, right? Like, you're in this damp, wet sulfur cave with a bunch of other gross, not naked people, but borderline naked people. And there was something gross about it and uncomfortable. But like, as I continued doing it, I enjoyed it. Like, it was so fun to just get that hot and get that uncomfortable. And there was some sort of pleasure in that. And that's how I look at Venus in Virgo. Like, you can find pleasure in these unorthodox ways, or again, like a dark, steamy, like wet, damp cave with a bunch of strangers doesn't sound that Venus, you know what I mean? But there's some sort of a pleasure or a reward from it. And Venus in Virgo is really, really good at saying, okay, here's this weird, unorthodox thing. How can we enjoy it a little bit? Here's this thing. I always talk about Venus in Virgo being like thrifting, right? It's this used, tattered piece of clothing that someone literally discarded away. They didn't want anymore. But you find it and it works perfectly with your wardrobe. It's on sale. And thrifting is now this huge fucking thing. It wasn't even like 10 years ago, but now everyone goes to the thrift stores and that's what most of their fashion is. That's Venus and Virgo. And you just have to look at both. And again, look at the things Venus rules, whether that's relationships, whether that's fun and pleasure, indulgence. You have to do things that aren't necessarily the Louis Vuitton or the Gucci thing. You have to find the thrift store item. You have to find, again, there's a Japanese thing. I forgot what it's called, but it's like a vase breaks and you glue it together with like gold and it makes it even better. That's kind of the vibe with Venus and Virgo. So you are going to have an opportunity to kind of change your way about what is fun for you and find fun in the things that might be discarded. Then we have Mercury going retrograde. And this is the change time. Here's the thing about Mercury retrogrades, and I've been doing this for a long time. My opinion on a Mercury retrograde is like, if things are going to get delayed, if things are going to change, I would rather do them in a Mercury retrograde period. Because it's one of those things, for example, I'm in the middle of switching from my Patreon to my website. I haven't released this yet, but you guys, I will probably just say it now. I'm going to be launching courses and not like, I have a course on my website right now. Don't worry about getting it because it doesn't work, but you're going to get that course for free. And it's just a basic course, but this is going to be a course that we go really, really, really deep into all of the astrology. You'll be able to walk away and know pretty much exactly what the fuck astrology is, know what you're talking about, and you'll pretty much know everything from that point. But I'm going to be launching that. However, it's going to take me a little while to get people over on my Patreon to my website to test things over because I've completely redid my website, like the whole back end infrastructure and everything. And so I'm using this Mercury retrograde to switch people over to get that, get the kinks worked out, to figure out what's working, what's not working. So we can have that to where when I do launch it live in public for you guys, it works seamlessly. That's what I like a Mercury retrograde for is I know there's going to be delays. I know there's going to be problems. So let me do this thing right now so I can work through all of those issues. However, if you're expecting everything to work perfectly, if you're expecting everything to be right on time, and it's just not going to be that way. You have to be open. And again, that's what's fun about planning for something like this is like, I know it's not going to go perfect. What does go perfect? There are going to be little tiny things. And last Mercury retrograde, not the last one, but the one in Aries, I fucked so many things up. I think that was actually the Mercury retrograde thing. I tried to like get ahead of it and it totally didn't work, which I was just like, and it wasn't even Mercury in shadow. I'm still kind of upset about that. But do yourself a favor, understand things are going to get delayed. When you have more of the information, you're going to change your mind about things. In my Mercury retrograde video, I talked about signing a contract. As you read this contract, there's going to be terms and conditions that you don't agree with. And you're going to have to resign. You're going to have to revisit that contract, rewrite that contract. You're going to have to negotiate that. And that's what this Mercury retrograde is for. And that's where it begins, is Mercury is really on Sunday. So there's going to be some delays. There's going to be a changing in plans, and that's okay. However, it's this week that builds us up for this moment on Sunday. And then next week is still kind of the same thing. It's still relatively chill. Just now, Mercury is retrograde, and we have to now use that energy. We don't have much going on. All we have next week is Mercury retrograde conjoining Venus and the Sun sextiling Jupiter. Realistically, not all that bad. Pretty damn good transits. So using that time to all right, let's just focus on this Mercury retrograde. What are the plans that we have to change? What are things that we have to move over from? But use this week and next week and use the time that you have wisely. Because not next week. So that's going to be what, August 5th through August 12th? Not that week. That week is going to be pretty decent, but the week after that is when everything is changing. So we have this 2-week period of just being able to focus on what's in front of us, take care of things until afterwards. Then we have all of the big fucking shit that we have to deal with. That's what I got with you guys this week. I really hope you enjoyed this weekly. Again, thank you for all your birthday wishes. Like this video. If you do, it does help me out in terms of the algorithm and everything like that. And subscribe again if you want to keep up to date with everything. The astrology changes so much between the next, 12 months, and I have so much content to give you guys. So make sure you subscribe so you never miss out on it. With that being said, I love and appreciate you, and I'll be seeing you guys next week.